Well, welcome everybody. And this is the 19th. This is the 19th Margaret Horn, which is incredible, really, when I think about it. And next year would be the 20th. And because it's be a special year, we probably do it in person. So thank you very much for being online at this time of the day. I know it's an awkward time for some of you, but it's trying to meet everybody's needs is always a bit tricky. But next year we'll have a champagne and canapes, as my children call them, and then we can enjoy each other's company. So today we're going to talk about the baby policy and the challenges of baby policy with the balance between the kind of economic challenges and the needs of babies and quality. And you indeed might hear a few babies because I'm right here in Soho Nursery with Greg and Vic, who are supporting us from the sidelines here, both of them. And we'll follow the usual format, 2 minutes each to everybody, and then we open the sort of the debate. I'm very delighted that our old friend Gabby Wozwiak is chairing today, who's a freelance journalist, and some of you will know her work from working in the sector. And so she will keep a close eye on you, and we will put questions in the chat. So I think we can kick off, and thank you again for covering this and for being interested in this subject. So I'm going to go on to mute, and I'm going to hand over to Gabby.
Thanks, everybody. It's great to be here, especially to be in a LEYF nursery in Soho. I've just had a little look around, and it's really a really nice setting, really interesting. So today we're going to talk about, is offering childcare from 9 months truly the best for babies, or is it more about boosting the economy? And we're going to come at it from all angles. Thanks to our great panel, we're going to explore what's good for parents, what's good for early years practitioners, the government, the economy, and of course, importantly, babies. Now, I'm going to ask the panel to introduce themselves individually in just a moment. But just before, I'll just give you a little explanation about who I am. So I write for UK newspapers, currently mainly The Guardian, Telegraph and iNewspaper. I've worked in-house at child-focused magazines like Children and Young People Now. I actually covered early years back in the days when Liz Truss was our childcare minister, and tried to alter ratios in settings. So I think we can all remember clearly what happened after that. I also have written for Nursery World since 2013, covering all aspects of early education and care, which means I get to speak to a lot of people in the sector. And one of my great passions when it comes to reporting on children is understanding early childhood brain development. And actually, I went to Ukraine after Russia began its full-scale invasion in 2022 to report precisely on how that was impacting young children's mental health. And that was part of a fellowship that I did with the Dart Center for Trauma and Journalism at Columbia University School of Journalism in New York. So I'm particularly interested to hear today about that aspect of early childhood. Having said all that, I'm also a mother. I have 3 children aged 6, 8 and 10. And before I came here today, I had a little look at the photos on my phone of my children when they were aged 9 months old. And it was really nice to remember just how kind of alive they are at that age. At 9 months, they were grabbing everything, eating sand on the beach, crawling around, babbling away, and really the kind of children that you had to keep your eye on the whole time. But what the photos didn't capture was still very poor sleep at night, a lot of clinging onto mum, and I was still breastfeeding. So personally, I think it would have been very difficult for me to hand a child over at that age. I was lucky that I was able to hold on to them for a few more months. But obviously, these are personal choices, and sometimes choices made from necessity. So let's explore what it looks like, children going into nurseries at 9 months old. Let's hear from the professionals what they have to say about it. Let's go to Christina. Could you introduce yourself, please?
Hi, I'm Christina. I've worked for London Early Years Foundation for 19 years. So currently working in Stoke Newington Nursery. And I'm also a mother, and my daughter actually came to nursery with me when she was 9 months old. So I've experienced both sides. So having my daughter in nursery and also supporting other parents having their children in nursery.
That's great. Thank you so much. And Sarah, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, hello everybody. I'm Sara Bonetti. I'm a researcher right now. let's say I have about 20 years of experience in what I call an obsession rather than expertise in early childhood education and care, particularly on the workforce. So I bring the research side, the evidence-based side. I'm leading on a project on the baby room that is really exploring the babies and the workforce and quality in the baby room after the expansion of the policy. I also come with a mom hat. I do have a 10-year-old, my almost 10. My sleep pattern hasn't improved yet, so every child is different. But I think more than anything, I come to this with the fact that I'm a firm believer in the motto, it takes a village to raise a child. And I had no village when my daughter was born. That's another story for another day. But I think that our first year with her really made me think very carefully about who is in this village and how do we take care of this village as well, which is why I'm really focused on early years workforce and educators in my work.
Oh, thank you, Sarah. Yeah, that's a really lovely saying, and I also agree with you on that one. Could we hear from Anne? Are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Can you see me? Yeah, great. I'm Anne Fennell. I'm a wife and mother of 6 sons, ranging from 24 years old to 10. I chair the organisation Mothers at Home Matter. It was an organisation founded over 30 years ago in response to the growing pressure on mothers to return to the workforce before they or their children were ready. We're a voluntary organisation, a group of mothers fitting this around our caring, our work, and other responsibilities. And we're just passionate that this opportunity is not lost to other mothers, really, and the next generation, because we are a dying breed. Our work centres on 3 core aims, which is to promote an understanding of young children's development needs, especially in the earliest years. We represent mothers who want to spend more time at home with their babies, highlighting the vital social and economic value of unpaid care. And we campaign for an economic level playing field so that families can make a real choice as to how they care for their children. I also serve as president of the European Federation of Parents and Carers at Home, which is a collaboration of 11 organisations across Europe advocating for the recognition of and value of unpaid care. So that's who I am.
It sounds like you're very busy, Anne. Thank you very much. And could we hear from Tina, please?
Hello, so I'm Tina Maltman and I'm the CEO of Childminding UK, and we're a national charity supporting registered childminders, but also lobbying on their behalf so that they actually have a voice. I've worked in early years for almost 40 years. I'm a mum of 3, nana to 5, step nana to 3 more, and just quite recently step great nana to a little one who's about to start nursery with her 9-month-old funding. I've spent most of my life working, supporting and training childminders, but I've also been a childminder and I've worked in preschool. During the last 40 years, I've seen many policy changes, but not all seem to consider the needs of the children. And I think debates such as this are vital because they raise public awareness about the issues within the workforce, but also about the developmental needs of babies, which can in turn equip parents with the knowledge about what are the challenges in early years, but also what they should be looking for when they're going out and finding a place for their 9-month-old baby.
Great, thank you, Tina, and congratulations on being a great nana. That's an amazing achievement. I forgot to say earlier that if any of the participants want to put any questions to our panel, please do put those in the chat and we'll try and get to them a bit later. Why don't we start by talking about babies themselves? Christina, could we go back to you? I think it's really interesting that you can talk to us about the perspective of having your own 9-month-old in a setting. So you're both the parent and the practitioner. You work on the front line with babies every day. What do you see as the benefits and the limits of early childcare?
So I think going back to what Sarah said about it takes a village. So from my own experience, feeling quite isolated at first when you give birth. And I remember going to an NCT group after COVID, after we was allowed to go and visit, and just having other parents advice, being able to talk to other parents was so important. So I think beginning nursery with her, I just thought, oh, okay, I'm doing it right. Like when you get everyone else's views and you can see, okay, this child is developing like my child. So just having that support network and meeting other parents. I think as well, socially, it's so important. So I remember taking my daughter out and she was just frightened of everyone. So she would just cry. So I think building her confidence as well and just building that social aspect was so important for her and other children in the nursery.
That's so interesting. And what about the limits? Do you see any limitations to children starting childcare from 9 months?
I think no, because with like following from my own experience, I've seen such benefits. I think it's supporting the families. So it's always parents are quite anxious about the child starting. So it's just about having an open door policy, them being able to come and speak to you, feeling comfortable to speak to you. So just having a really open door policy, just knowing that parents can come and just check in with you whenever they want to. So they can call, they can arrange parent meetings. So from my own experience, was been really positive.
Yeah, that's great. So around 9 months, sometimes see children experiencing like separation anxiety, can't we?
Mhm.
So how do your team do that? You just said it's so important to support the parents. How do you support attachment and emotional security? What do your team do?
So we have a key worker system, which is so vital when a child first begins nursery. So having those settling in sessions for the children, so they build that initial bond with someone. So that's really, really important. Um, Also, the teachers responding sensitively to parents. So just making sure that they're there. If a parent's really upset, just being really sensitive to a child starting nursery, and again, just ensuring that we're giving regular feedback and updates. And like I said, just so that they know they can come in and they can call and they can speak to us anytime they want to. And just I think just reassuring the parent, because sometimes it is that they don't want to go back to work, but they have to. So just being really sensitive about it, I think. But I think again, just building that community within a nursery. So they just feel really welcome when they're coming into the nursery is so important.
Thank you. Yeah. Christina, sorry, not Christina, Tina, you represent childminders, and childminders offer home-based care. And some people would argue that that's more personal. We've just heard from Christina that a nursery environment is great for socializing a young child. What do you think is different about what childminders can offer? Do you think it bridges the gap between parental and professional care in a different way?
I do. I think babies thrive on familiarity. And of course, one consistent carer throughout the day and throughout the week is what childminders offer. And babies won't thrive unless they can build those secure attachments that Christina spoke about. And it's more likely that that's easier for babies, possibly with one consistent carer, due to the vital nurturing that one consistent person can have. Childminders also offer that home from home experience. So visually, it's closest to what the babies would receive at home with mummy and daddy. And this can help babies settle more quickly, along with the smaller childminder ratios. So that can offer a more homely experience too. Also, I think for as babies grow, because childminders tend to care for children from babies to senior school age, there's less transitions because there aren't baby rooms and toddler rooms in childminders' houses. And then the children can stay with the childminder when they go to school, and siblings are cared for together, which we know the developmental benefits to that for the older children who will learn caring and empathy and responsibility to the little ones. But also for the little children, it creates challenge when they see the bigger children that they admire doing things that they want to join in. I think the smaller ratios mean that there's more time for one-to-one interactions, which aid concentration, vocabulary, and a sense of belonging in the children. And in preparation for this, I actually asked several of our members who couldn't join because of the time for their thoughts on the questions. And the phrases that came up most were attachment, interactions, no.
Oh, hi, Tina. I don't know. I can't hear you. I don't know if everybody else can hear you. No, people are shaking their heads. Oh, you're back now. I'm really sorry. You were just talking about your childminders had given you some feedback, and the word that came up most was attachment, and then we lost you.
Yeah, okay, sorry about that. I don't know why that happened. So attachment and interactions and nurturing and home from home quality care were the things that came up mostly in the childminders that fed back to us. Lots of concerns about the government rhetoric about schools, school nurseries for very young children, and just the relationship based, and also being able to go out into the community more easily, because that is much more easy for a childminder with less numbers of children than it is for group settings. And the community can help children ease into transitions into preschool and things, because they're used to the buildings and the staffing and often other children that are there as well. So I do think it can bridge the gap, simply because of the way they operate.
Yeah, that all makes sense. And what about parents? Because Christina was just saying the importance of being able to support those parents that are feeling anxious and maybe they don't want to go to work.
Absolutely. And one of the things that parents worry about most is obviously leaving their children, missing their children, but also missing those firsts, like the first steps and things like that. So it's about being sensitive, and it's about supporting parents as well as supporting children. And childminders are standard, have conversations with each parent at the beginning and the end of each day. One of our members said that the relationships with parents is paramount when caring for babies. Obviously, babies can't go home and tell mummy and daddy what they've done throughout the day like our 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds can. But it's also about signposting and supporting the parents, especially if they're first-time parents. When children stay with the same childminder for many years, it helps create a really good, strong relationship that lasts. Many childminders stay in contact with minded families. I do as well. From when I was a childminder, I'm still in contact with some of the families. It's a really close relationship. Childminders get invited to christenings and parents' weddings. For lots of childminders, there are 2 hubs for that child, each of which have a childminder and the parents in it. One of our members even attended, this is about, it takes a village, as Sarah was saying. One of our members attended the funeral of a minded child's granddad. This little girl wanted to go. The family wanted her to be able to go because she wanted to. The childminder went to the funeral, sat behind this little girl in case this little girl needed to come out, and she had her childminder bag of tricks with her, with stories and everything else in it. And this child had been with her since she was 4 months old. And that's the sort of relationship that childminders can build with parents, and that self-supporting, and it's just the way that childminders work. And as I said before, it's easier to provide a wide range of daily activities, going out and about and things. And often when parents are working part-time, on a day when a childminder is going to the park with minded children, the parents will join too with their children who are friends of the minded children that are there that day. So they can experience community from a very young age, and it is about working in partnership with parents, not just informing parents. There's a very great difference in that.
Yeah, that does all sound lovely, and I can tell you that my childminder did come to my wedding as well, actually. But what about, these benefits could also be gained from a child that goes to childcare at a later stage. It doesn't necessarily have to be for 9 months. So I'm interested to hear now from Anne. What would you say in response to that? Let's be honest, parents, in the majority of cases, like mums and dads at home, might be experiencing some of the isolation that Christina talked about. And you've argued that babies benefit most from being with their primary caregiver during the first year. So could you tell us a bit about the evidence that backs that up?
Yeah, I think babies need very simple things, but very powerful things: love, nurture, consistency, continuity. And as the Princess of Wales has put it, the love that we receive in the earliest years fundamentally shapes who we become and how we thrive as adults. And the bond between that mother and child is developed from birth, not from birth, from pregnancy. And most mothers want to be able to be there. And I think the sad thing is that most mothers now can't be there. So Tina was talking about the attachment. Mothers want to be the primary caregiver. And actually, a lot of mothers write to us really distressed that they have to leave their babies at 9 months. What the science, those critical first 1,000 days show that it's not really about learning goals. It's about building the baby's emotional world and their sense of security and the foundation that really sets them up for all later development. Babies are born neurologically fragile, they can't regulate their emotions and their stress levels on their own. So the role of the mother or primary caregiver, and it's the mother, I think the sad thing is that mothers often want to be the primary caregiver. We buffer our babies from stress, and it's a lovely relationship for the mother as well as for the baby. Just simply by being there, our presence, our voice helps the baby stay calm. And I had a lovely example the other day. I've been asked to be godmother to a friend of ours, and she was in the front and I was in the back with the baby. The baby was strapped in, and I was looking after the baby, but it got upset, and there's only so much that I could do. And then the mother from the front started singing, and the baby's eyes just lit up, his face beamed, and he calmed. And so there is a lovely, unique bond. We regulate our child's emotions. We keep them from going too high, from going too low. We soothe them, we rock them, and we develop that relationship. We also provide the cues as to how they see the world. When they hurt themselves, how do we react? Do we smile? And the gaze of a child is just wonderful. It's just such a wonderful relationship. And I just think it's sad that many mothers are missing that for economic reasons. So particularly when a mother feels she has no choice but to go back, I think there's a lot of stress that comes onto the family. Also, if you've got to go back in 9 months, the kind of stress that puts on a mother's relationship, she has to then not feed her, but get the baby off the breast and onto the bottle. And some babies do, and some babies don't. My son did not want to come off my breast. That puts added pressure onto the family. And there is evidence that the babies feel, separation anxiety and some level of stress. And across all of the evidence that we've looked at, the key factor in successful outcomes of children is the home environment and the parental engagement. So what we're doing with this 9-month policy and all of the policies that are coming from the government really are diminishing or reducing the parental involvement and actually distrusting the parent in favor of the professional. And we just hear time and time again, the professional is better. And that's the kind of language that I'm really worried about in terms of parents. And we're not looking, a lot of the successful programs that you see in terms of nursery care are short hours with the involvement of the parent. And I think that's really key. We're not talking about long hours away from the parent. There is a place for nurseries, and a lot of these programs, like Perry School program, the ABC project, you're looking at short hours and very targeted. You're looking at disadvantaged children. What the studies don't show is the difference between home care with ordinary parents and long hours in daycare. So we don't have a lot of evidence, and I really turn the question around and say, what evidence do we have to see that this is beneficial? This separation is beneficial for young children for these long hours in daycare. So it's not really about idealizing motherhood, because we know it's hard and we know we need the support around. And there are other things like play groups and church, but we have actually broken down a lot of the support. And so daycare does provide, or childminding does provide that kind of support, and families now live further away, so we do need something else to help mothers and parents. But what we don't want to do is take the parent out of the equation, and particularly the mother.
Yeah, thank you. There's a lot to think about there, and it kind of leads on to what your point about society suggesting that the professional knows better than the mother. Sarah's been very vocal about the fact that quality is what's very important in caregiving. I wondered, Sarah, if you could talk about that a bit. Do you think that the quality of care in baby rooms could ever replace the attachment bond of a parent, or is that the wrong sort of question to be asking?
So first of all, I wish it was true that people say that a professional is better. Like working within the earlier sector, the common complaint from educators that we hear is how little status and how little respect and how not valued they all feel. So I really, really wish that was true, but that is not the perception of the sector that society has of them, and not even from some parents sometimes. But going to your question, yeah, I really do think I think it's the wrong question, right? Like it's the wrong comparison. We're not talking about putting the parents versus the nursery or the childminder. And if we look at the evidence, yes, the evidence says that we know, we don't have to speculate. We know what baby needs. They need very consistent, high quality interaction with the main caregiver, but also we know that the evidence is clear that there is something called secondary attachment. So it's not just one attachment with one person. So I really wish we all lived in a world where the mom can stay home and not have financial issues. But I think we need to consider, one, the reality that many families are facing. We have single parents, we have financial stress, we have postpartum depression, which cross every socioeconomic background, by the way. We have children without parents, we have children in care, we have refugees, we have homeless. When it comes to that, I don't think we can say stay at home with the mom is the best thing. And even just the fact that the secondary attachment, thank God, people like children with regular families, or what we used to call normal families, which fortunately we moved on, they do have a secondary attachment to the father, to the grandfather, to the uncle. But again, it takes a village. And if we look at how we live now, we live in very mononuclear families where grandparents are not part of the equation. As I mentioned, disclaimer, my daughter was born in the US. I did not have a maternity leave. She was born sick. I had to quit work. I didn't have a maternity leave. I didn't have the option to say, I'm going to send her back. I actually sent her to nursery later than I wanted. When I finally moved here and could send her to nursery. And for me, it was a massive relief, right? And so I think it's like it's the wrong equation. The equation is the baby at the center and everybody else around. And everybody have a role, except that different babies have different people that are part of this equation and therefore different networks. When it comes to quality, we know that that matters. Like in this, I go back. We don't need 60. I'm not saying that everybody should be 60 hours in a nursery and that every nursery is the same or every other relationship is the same. We need high quality. The evidence is clear about that. And that is one of the issues that we're having with the expansion of the entitlement, that while many settings, childminders and nursery alike, offer extremely high quality provision, we cannot guarantee yet that that's the case everywhere. But that is, the solution is not scrap the policy or scrap the support for parents.
I think that there was some Ofsted publication yesterday that said, I think more than 90% of providers were rated good or excellent. So the quality, like you say, is high. But yeah, that consistency is important, isn't it? I don't know if you have anything, you've had any ideas about how that can actually be delivered. Is there any way you would suggest the sector could really understand babies and the 9-month-olds and deliver exactly what they need?
From my point of view, of course, the key in delivering quality is the workforce, whether it's the childminder or the educators. Workforce is not a technical detail that can come afterward like a second thought. Just like we want nurturing relationship at home, we need nurturing relationship, and they don't come just by accident. It takes training, it takes experience, it takes the right environment in the nursery or in the home of the childminder. So the number one element, and the evidence is very clear around this, beyond the small ratios, which we do have in England, and the small group size, I would add, that we really push with our work on the baby room project, which we do not have in England, it's the team of educators that work around the babies. And again, that consistency, the recruitment and retention problems that we have in England means that stable relationship outside of the house is not always there, while it should be.
Yeah, and I mean, that just moves on neatly to funding, which is what I was going to get to. I don't think a day goes by when a professional isn't thinking about government funding and the rates. So the rate for babies on average, a 9-month-old is £10.85 per hour per child. That's 2024 average government data I've got there. So for a nursery at a ratio of 3 to 1, apparently they can earn £32.55 per hour. I know that that's not the case for childminders, and I'm sure Tina would want to tell us about that. But first of all, Christina, I wanted to ask you about this. And do you feel that policymakers, the people in government, understand what it takes to truly provide nurturing care for under ones? And are they providing enough funding for you to do that?
So I think with the policymakers, it is about an economic. So they are looking at it from an economic point of view. But then I think it's about us as teachers having the passion and the drive to ensure that we're providing the best for the children. So always finding, ways to get our own funding in, I guess. And like Tina was saying about where she was saying about childminders having a real homely feel, I just wanted to say about the nursery. So we make it really homely. We're like a big family, really. So we also have parent workshops throughout the year. So we tailor that to what the parents need. So if any parents are struggling with something at home or they just want some support, so we just make it one big family. So we're doing loads of workshops, we do parent events, we get grandparents involved. So the children really do have that security here, even from such a young age. But I think for us, we're always trying to get more funding for sure to be able to support us. But we do have an in-house training. So again, it's about seeing with the teachers, what are their passions? What can we send them on training to ensure we're providing high quality for the children? But we are always looking for more funding, of course, to be able to drive that high quality.
Yeah, thanks, Christina. Yeah, so Tina, would you like to talk about that a little bit? How is the funding level affecting childminders looking after babies from 9 months old?
So the easy answer to is funding adequate. It's not adequate for childminders the way it is at the moment because it's built on those nursery ratios, and childminders ratios are 3 children under 5, whereas in a nursery it can be 8 or 13. I know it's 3 to 1 for babies. Childminders is usually 1 baby per adult. So the funding level for babies is good for most childminders. I mean, there are some childminders in London that are still losing money for every hour of care that they provide. The difficulty is when the children grow with a childminder, because the ratios don't change, but the funding levels drop when children are 2. But the biggest challenge is when the funding drops by over 50% when those children reach 3. We're already hearing childminders saying they won't be able to afford to keep children once they're 3, which isn't what they want when they've worked with that child and that family and built up a strong relationship. And it certainly isn't what the babies need to grow up somewhere and feel secure for 2.5 years and then have to leave. I think on top of the other funding restrictions are about voluntary payments that parents can be asked for so that they can have those richer experiences that Christina was talking about. And some parents are willing to pay that, but there's lots of restrictions on that now. And for any parents who are on universal credit themselves, even if the parents agree that they would like their child to have these extra rich experiences, universal credit won't include it. So parents aren't able to have that. And I think for childminders and nurseries to be able to offer high quality care, they need to be able to afford to do it. And the funding levels at the moment, because the way the government narrative suggests that that's all parents need to pay, it would be much better if it was subsidised funding, and then parents have got a real choice of where they choose for their child to go and will they pay what that takes, or there will be some people, especially for babies, who say, no, that funding level is absolutely adequate for me and there's no extra money that I need to have in order to provide what I want to provide for your baby.
Yeah, thank you, Tina. Sarah, just to go back to you again, I know I just mentioned that there is this sort of 90% plus good rating for our childcare in this country. But how do you view the situation? Is that something that's just happening right now? Like, is that going to decline? We've seen this new funding rolled out very fast, I think. Has the workforce been able to expand in line with that and to provide the level and quality of care that we need?
So first of all, there are a lot of people that do not take that statistics for granted. We know that passing an offset inspection and getting a good is not necessarily a complete view of quality. It's a complete view of meeting the requirements of the regulator. But in England, we do not look at quality in a more robust way systematically as they do in other countries. And there's a little bit also of disconnect between what parents look at as quality and what the nursery needs to provide really high quality. So I don't go by that statistics very much. They've also just changed the framework. So there are the inspection framework. So there are worries that the percentages might decrease. But I think specifically in the case of babies, we are worried that we had like we put the cart before the bull. So we did the expansion before having a real strategy about like how do we expand with quality. So there haven't been an extra thought in terms of workforce development. Again, through the project, which is like to date the biggest project on the baby room, and it feels a little odd sometimes to say that, but it is. And the previous one happened 10 years ago, so there's been just like a lack of attention to the baby room. But we've talked to more than 300 baby room educators and managers, and we've heard over and over again that training is not there, it's not available, very few can afford it. It's not just about money, it's also about the time to release staff. So the complications go beyond, for example, just giving a higher funding rate per hour. So that there's been like a little bit of like backward approach to expanding. And then the other fear that we have is that because the funding rate for babies is actually quite good, relatively speaking, compared to 3 and 4, we know that there are and there will be settings where it feels a little bit more like let's pack as many babies as possible. So while the evidence is clear that small group size matter, and we recommend 12 because it makes sense in England, but actually international evidence says 6 to 8. But we've heard quite a good amount of nurseries that have baby rooms with 30, 38 babies. And that, if you add to that, even in ratio, the educators, that means 40 plus bodies in a room. And every time we say that, people gasp. You can be the most prepared educator and have the most lovely setting in the world. And it's just like, it's too much. So we do know that luckily there are many nurseries that are not going into that rushed expansion, but there is much control over that. So we are worried and about the unintended consequences from this point of view.
Yeah, Anne, how does that make you feel to hear that kind of comment from Sarah? And I wondered about, how much society is valuing the role of parents who decide to care at home, because aren't they saving money for the government, for the economy?
High quality childcare is care by a parent, by a mother at home. There is no evidence to show that children either need education or socializing at 9 months. What you can provide, the mother to child, or is that one-to-one care and attention. You get to know the child and what your child needs intuitively. It's a lot of non-verbal communication that goes on in that first year. It seems awful to me that we're paying £13,000 or slightly under per child. If the taxpayer is paying that to somebody else to look after your child, but if you want to look after your child, you get nothing. So people can't afford to do it. It's just it's so painful because you're seen as doing work if you're being paid to do it, but if you do it for love, it's not valued at all. And actually, that is high quality childcare. And yes, I mean, all of the language around childcare it's only there if you're working, and so if you're staying at home, you're seen as idle, as lazy, as economically inactive, and we're not valuing the work that's being done by caring. It's really sad.
Yeah. With that in mind, like, is it possible that the way that we talk about childcare in this country is basically an economic problem? So again, going back to those numbers that were published by the government yesterday from Ofsted, they said the number of childminders has fallen by 1,000 from 26,000 to 25,000 from between August this year and last year. However, they then said the number of childcare on non-domestic premises has increased. So like, hooray, good news. But is this how do parents digest that information, and do they understand, the bigger picture, the bigger, all those things you just talked about, the fact that, love is important, and attachment, non-verbal communication. And again, if you are in a nursery, the opportunity to socialize and to get parental support. I don't know who wants to jump in and have a go at that.
Can I just say that when the policy was brought in, the Chancellor Jeremy Hunt, he said that the reason for introducing it was economic reasons. It was to get women back into the labour market. And he said almost half of non-working mothers said they would prefer to work if they could arrange suitable childcare. What he didn't say is that 3/4 of mothers are already working. So 75% of mothers are working. We've only got 25% of mothers at home because only a very small amount can afford to live on one income. And of those, he said, almost half of them would like to be in work, and that's a really small percentage. What he doesn't say is that 68% of mothers who are working would say they would rather be at home more if they could afford it. So the policy is very in one direction, and it is very much about getting mothers into work. And if we were to look at a holistic, what the child needs and what families need, and to allow families not to have too much stress in their lives, we would have some very different policies, and we would have a much more balanced supporting, maybe the money would follow the child, so that families could choose to have a childminder or nursery care or home care or grandparent care, or a mixture of both, more flexible working. There'd be lots more, we would tax families less, we might help them with housing. We would think about what families need to, stop them struggling so much, that they can actually devote some time to parenting, which is the key factor in successful outcomes of children. We have to parent around nursery care anyway, so the more you know your child, the better you're going to be able to do it. And if we keep telling parents that actually, it's not their responsibility, or they're no good, or someone else is better, then actually we do lose confidence, and people are losing confidence in parenting.
Yeah.
Can I come in?
Please,
one
yeah.
second on that? So I didn't mention before being a researcher, I actually started my career as a baby room teacher. One of my co-teacher, this older, fantastic professional, was just like one sitting very relaxed in a room full of, actually we were with 18 months old at the time. And just like very nonchalant, she was like, yeah, because this is their first encounter with democracy. And that really stuck with me. So when we think about like what babies don't need to socialize, or baby do not need to, to learn, like baby don't need education, baby don't need, well, babies start learning from their womb, right? And that is their first encounter with democracy, with a world that is not all around them, with a world that is not all about them being in a happy place in the womb with mom. And with the world is very diverse. So I get absolutely.
I think we've lost you again for a minute. Anyone else hear Sarah? No.
You lose me? Lost
Oh,
me?
you're back.
Okay.
You're back. Carry on.
I'm back. The concept of choice is a funny one, because it's something that is really valued in Anglo-Saxon societies, where like, I want to do this, it's my choice. But really, And this, I absolutely agree. Parents, we don't really have a full choice. We have very constrained choices. So the point is that the government, through their policies, should try to support the biggest number of people to thrive. So from this point of view, I'm really excited about this policy because finally it does give us a chance to talk about babies. We never talk about babies publicly.
What do babies need? And I agree with you. The policy should follow the evidence and what is best for babies. But I would love to see the evidence that high quality care is definitely the best, and that can be in different forms. But we need to see the evidence that it's better in, say, baby rooms or nursery care, rather than either home environments or childminders or grandparents.
But nobody's saying that it's better. That's the thing. I think it's a false dichotomy. And one thing that we really found in our work is like actually where it has worked is where the government, for example, started with a clear purpose. What is this for? But it's not about putting the home against the nursery. In fact, working with June and also with other nursery, they support the families as much as the baby. So I think it's the framing in this country that really needs to change. It's not either or one instead of the other. We are all in this.
If you put all funding in one direction and none in another direction, then you create economic incentives into one way and not another. If you fund things equally, then you allow people choice to do what's better. But I mean, like you say, the policy should follow the evidence, and it would be good to see the evidence.
Yeah, I think that would be very interesting, actually. And it reminds me of something, I don't know if you're aware of Dr. Naomi Fisher, who's a psychologist but mainly studies older children. And she talks about the fact that all the studies of children's behaviour are conducted on children who go to school, and never actually children who stayed at home or were educated at home. And there's very few studies about children who are educated at home. So therefore, the children's behaviour, as we understand it, is always within the context of the biggest intervention that's ever taken place in children's lives. And I think that is really interesting, and it would be great to see some evidence for both sides. Christina, do you want to come in on this? Do you think that the government has framed this in an unfair way? Is it one or the other, home or childcare?
I think it does seem like, for many mothers, they do feel like they perhaps have to go back to work, when the child is 9 months, and for some it is the case. But I think going back to the point that, we do support the mother and we do support the family. So it's about us working together. So, we shouldn't be pitched against each other. We need to come together and work together to do what's best for the baby. And I think as well, we are from such a young age is where we support the children to learn. So we're teaching them the fundamental steps to then go on to later education. And I do believe it does start from such a young age. I think just speaking from my own experience, going back to my own daughter, she was really frightened of anyone. So, her coming to nursery at such a young age, I just saw her blossom, and she's just gone off to school as a confident young girl. But I do think if she didn't start nursery so young and form those other attachments with such great teachers, that she wouldn't have, I don't think, gone off to school as confident as she did.
Thank you. Yeah, I feel like you had such a unique situation there, that you were able to still be with her and also be doing your job at the same time. Tina, would you like to come in on this one?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. And I think listening to Anne and Sarah and Christina, when we are talking to people who want to become a childminder, probably 75 to 80% of them want to be stay-at-home mums. They don't want the thought that somebody else is enjoying all the key points and all the outings and things with their children. So they become childminders because they need to earn that extra income for their family, but they want to spend that time with their young children. And yes, those children have to share mummy's time or daddy's time with other children. But I noticed that when I was a childminder, I became a childminder when my youngest was quite small, and she, having to share me with other children and having other friends around, as they used to call each other, it meant that she seems to be much more sociable than her brothers. because I think childminding has done her good, and I think lots and lots of childminders do it because they want to be at home. They don't want the thought that somebody else is enjoying their children, because that can form some almost jealousy with, well, I've got to go to work, and you're going to, when I come home tonight, I know you're going to say, we've all had a lovely day and we've done this and we've been to the farm and we've had the paddling pool out this afternoon. And that's not really necessarily going to make me feel better as a parent. It'll make me feel happy my child's happy, but it won't necessarily do anything for my well-being as a parent, because I can't do that. So I think that there's lots of viewpoints to it, but that is why lots of childminders become childminders, or they become childminders because they know they're about to start their own family and they don't want to be going back to work, or it's not affordable for them to go back to work and pay childcare. That was obviously before this new policy, but I think it's really difficult for some parents, and childminding is an option for some. It isn't an option for everybody, because everybody's different and every child's different. And some children will thrive better in a childminder's environment, and some will thrive better in a nursery environment. There needs to be a good choice of lots of different things, including respect for the parents who choose to stay at home, including for the people who choose to work in nursery or choose to be a childminder. There isn't a hierarchy of who's better at this. It is all about the quality for the babies. And that starts with that training that Sarah said about. It starts with understanding babies' brain development and understanding what you can do to help children learn through their senses and have time and room to explore. It's about all that. It's not necessarily about what your Ofsted inspection grade says that day, because it could be 6 years before Ofsted come out again. So, you know, there's lots of things to unpick in this, and there isn't an easy answer.
Yeah, that's true. There isn't an easy answer, but maybe we'll get to the answer by the end of this conversation. I wanted to go back to something Anne said. She said that when Jeremy Hunt announced this policy, he said it was to get women back into work. What about the dads? I mean, is the government talking about dads? Are they allowed to stay at home and look after their children? Is that valued? Are they promoting that idea that dads can also raise their children at home or also work in early years education? Who would like to answer that question?
No, the policy, that particular policy is not about dads. Although it would be lovely to see more dads at home, the policy, that particular policy is a labour market policy. We're not really looking at the development needs of a child. It's a simple answer.
And can I come in here as well? I think there's not a lot of government support for dads staying at home, or even staying at home for their paternity leave, because the pay for that isn't always enough that families can manage. I think there is lots of recognition that for children, it's really valuable to have men in early years. And I think while early years doesn't have much respect nationally, early years workers are low paid, but they're also not as well respected as other people with degrees in different professions. And I think while that happens, it's not really that attractive to men, and that alongside all the safeguarding concerns, the lower pay, the lack of respect for the industry that you've chosen to do, are all reasons that men don't choose early years. But I don't think policy is helping, particularly for those that would like to stay at home.
Thank you. And what about Christina or Sarah? Do you want to talk about that at all, about the role of men here? Can we get them more involved, or is the government excluding them from these conversations?
Should I go, Christina? Well, Christina can talk about LEYF involvement in getting more men into childcare, actually into early education and care. I mean, this is not an early childhood education and care policy. This is a labor market policy, a welfare policy, a benefits policy, right? So the parental leave, the shared parental leave is not working. Not as in other countries, and it's definitely not enough. So I think we've seen a big shift in this last generation, also from dads that step up and really do want to be home. But no, the support is definitely not enough. From the point of view of, again, men working in the sector, we always struggle, and I'm sure June also can talk about that for a long time. But I think there's also there's a reverse stigma and prejudice as well, which we need to acknowledge. And this, I'm sorry, it can be mom's fault sometimes, right? Where they're not comfortable with another man changing a nappy. Because again, why? Well, because he's a professional, but again, the sector is not seen as a professional. And there's been a big row in Australia, and we're really, fearful that it doesn't come here. But it's a bigger cultural and societal shift there that still hasn't happened, and that doesn't only relate with childcare policy. That has is just much bigger than that.
The good news is that I have someone behind me, you can see him actually, Greg, who is, what's your title, Greg?
Manager of Soho Nursery.
Manager of Soho Nursery. So Greg can give us his thoughts on this matter.
Hello. Yes, I mean, go back to what you were saying about it takes a village. And there's, 50% of the village missing when you look at early years care. They're because, 50% of the population, of course, are men, and men should play a important role in early years, because there is so much evidence that having men in early years is beneficial to the children's experience and the experience of the village, if I put it that way. So, for example, if we want to make fathers themselves feel that they're more valued when they're coming into a nursery, or when they're having their experiences of being a father, especially first-time fathers, sometimes it really helps to have another man on site that they can speak to, that they can share their experiences with. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. There is so much benefit to having the other 50% of the village in early years, whether it be the children's development or just their experience of those 5 years that they might be nosing, and particularly in babies. I think sometimes, men are more likely to take risks with the children. When I say that, they might be more inclined to let the children climb a little bit higher or run a little bit faster. And children need that. As important it is to have the nurture and care, which men also provide, of course, with children in early years and in the family. There's something that the men in a family, whether it be the village, the family, or the early years care, there's something very important they bring to the children as well, bring to the table, not least the ability to be good communicators, to have an understanding of their emotions. And I think it is very important that we have more men working in early years, because it just is so helpful for the child themselves, I think. But all the things that you're saying before, of course, are true. It's about what kind of career is it? Is the career respected? Are the terms and conditions? Is the pay up to standard? And I think, honestly, a lot of men just don't consider it. I think it's as simple as it just has never crossed their mind. A lot of men who work in our organisation may have come into early years because they were in youth work, or their fathers themselves, or their uncles, and they think, you know what, this might be something for me. But before that, they just simply never considered it. It was not something that came up when they were in school or in FE college, or indeed when they were doing their degrees or their vocational training, whatever they're doing. So there's a huge debate to be had about men in early years, but I think it's often overcomplicated. Men just aren't aware, they don't think about it. And there's like I say, 50% of the population, children need to have positive experiences of that. Let's go back to the 1950s. Your father might have been at work all the time, and your mother's at home. And children and people of that age, I often hear them complain that they didn't necessarily have a role model, even though their parents were together. And in this modern and fast changing world, often a children's positive experience of a male role model happens in an early years setting. So, I mean, really, this is a whole other debate. But you called me in at short notice, so it's just the tip of the iceberg. So I think it's worth considering anyway.
I think I was just thinking about how there are these stereotypes, aren't there, about men in childcare, that they'll be the ones that do the rough and tumble play, all the risky things. But if you're thinking about a 9-month-old, that's a kind of different image. And well, I think parents need to have that in mind, don't they? If they are going to hand their child to some childcare or a childminder, that image needs to be in their head. It could be a male or female practitioner, but is the government portraying that accurately? Like, when it's offering these funded hours, what is in the mind of the parent? What are they imagining that they're going to receive? So I think it's so important that we hear more of what you were just describing, like the real picture of childcare. And I must say that there is actually a very young and male apprentice working in the room next door right now, who was having a lovely time with some children on the mat and some instruments. I walked in.
Absolutely. I mean, he's a very important role model, and the children, they honestly just absolutely adore him. So, and that's good for the parents when they see that. I think a lot of parents are surprised, and like I said before, I think they often don't consider it. It's not even that they have negative impression; they just think, oh, and they're pleasantly surprised. And the child is a role model to their own children, but also, like I say, a role model to the village. It reflects back, and I think often it can make fathers feel more secure about what they're doing in the home and what they're bringing to the table in their families, in the village, and in society. So it's like a sort of tree, really, and it branches out all across.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry for putting you on the spot there.
Okay.
Can I just add something about our male childminders? Is that okay?
Yes, that's okay.
There are quite a lot of male childminders, and it is true that most of them are childminding alongside their female partners, but we do have some standalone male childminders. But where there is a husband and wife team, they are really, really popular with parents, and they're particularly popular with single mums, maybe because they know that there isn't necessarily that positive role model in the child's life. Particularly if they live a long way away from grandparents or they don't know who they are. And they are really, really popular. And as he just said, they do bring different things, and they can do the nurturing as well. Of course they can. But where it works well, it's really, really valued by the parents. And I've spoken to male childminders who have left their careers that they had before because they said, well, my wife became a childminder. She's having all this fun with my children. I'm working 10 and 12 hours a day and I'm not seeing my children. I want to have the fun she's having. So they're doing it for the same reasons that some of our female childminders are doing it. But it is being absolutely well respected. And on that safeguarding comment that Sarah said, absolutely, it can be a worry. But we don't tend to find that so much when there's a husband and a wife working together. But even the lone childminders that we know, they've cared for children from babies, and it does work. But there is still that worry out there with some parents. But no, it does take a village, and we do need everybody in that village.
Yes, precisely. Thank you, Tina. I've got a question from someone called Poppy. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Toronto Caring Democracy 2013. She says, I'm drawing on Toronto's Caring Democracy 2013 here, which argues philosophically that democratic societies must value and distribute care more justly. How do you suggest we work with government to reframe ECEC policy so it's not driven solely by economic productivity, but by a broader democratic commitment to care? And she said she would like to hear all of your perspectives on it. If anybody would like to answer her question. Or I can come back to it.
I haven't actually seen the study or anything, but I think it starts with the narrative and the language and how we see care, because the picture that we often paint is, of childcare being a burden. We see, it's talked about with such negative language that it's destroying our careers. It's the childcare policy was implemented to remove the obstacles that stop us doing meaningful work and contributing to the economy, and the obstacles are our children, and that defeats it. Raising children is a joy as well as challenging and all the other things that come with it. And if we see care as valuable to society, then I think the whole framework changes. And raising children is really important. It's a really important job. It's really vital to the well-being of our society. If we start to look at things with a different perspective, then we'll start to value care. And if we start to put maybe an economic figure by it, I know that the unpaid carer, I can't remember how much it related, but it's a substantial amount of money, or rather, we only count something if it's like a rise in GDP, if it's measured by GDP, but we don't count the strength of our relationships, the well-being of our children. If we could count some of these invisible things, and maybe we'd have a different perspective of care, and maybe others would want to do it. Well, that's a start anyway.
I agree, and I think it needs to go even broader. I mean, the whole care, the whole issues with undervalued care is so beyond early years, right? Like we have the same issues in adult care. So it really is, again, a societal thing. And I think, again, for me, I see also like very much as a cultural issue in very individualistic societies versus more collectivistic society where I grew up. But we wouldn't even having this debate in this way, right? If we valued care, and that goes for the carers of young children as work. They would be highly paid, while 44% of early years educators are benefits receiver, so they are themselves in poverty. It would go for parents and carers who are not parents. Like that would go for those who have, for children in care and their carers. It would go for adult carers. So now we are all focusing on, again, this, like the new big trend is the intergenerational buildings, right? Which I think they're a brilliant idea. Again, we need to look at where society is. But in the end, it's not like we discover hot water. That is what it used to be back in the days, right? Like it's how society used to work with intergenerational families, with and people. So we need to make do with what society is now. It's nuclear. So we create intergenerational building with home cares together with nurseries, which is brilliant. But again, I think it's just like that is really a bigger society thing that goes with any form of care. What bothers me is when a veterinarian nurse who cares for animal makes more than an early years carer. That's what bothers me, because then even within carers, there are those that are valued more. And when we value more those that work with animals, for example, that those who work with children, then I think there's something upside down in the society pyramid of values. But again, it goes back to purpose and value. And that takes generations to change, which is why, again, I'm excited that we talk about babies. I think this is an opportunity to really reconsider care in a different way. But yeah, I think it's a long road.
If I'm allowed to jump in, this is most making me think of the early intervention argument, which is, of course, that we will save the economy money if we intervene earlier and front load investing in good care and good childhoods, good children, well looked after and cared for children go into healthier adults, which have less mental health problems and are less likely to end up with criminal behaviour or anything like that, which costs society a lot of money, and eventually live longer and happier lives and hopefully need less care in older age. But yes, trying to convince governments to invest early is something that the sector's been trying to do for a long time. I guess it's up
That
to
also means investing in parents too.
Yes, exactly. Shall we talk about, I mean, we have kind of touched on it already, but one of the big questions we wanted to address here in this discussion was, what would a baby-centred policy look like? If we could rewrite the government's focus on childcare, economies, everything that we're talking about here, what if they put babies central to that? How would it look from each of your perspectives? Anne, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah. First, I would change the language. I would describe caring at home not as economic inactivity, but as, actively caregiving. And I wouldn't describe children as burdens and obstacles that get in the way of doing more important work. I would describe it as, raising families would be very important work, and valuable to family life and also society. Economically, I think we would support all families, all struggling families. So we wouldn't just subsidise childcare for mothers to go to work, but we would help. We would help all families. So you could either have the money following the child, or so you could have a credit or a voucher system, where you can either pay a nursery or a childminder or a grandparent or your own or yourself, or help, so you can be home. You have a home allowance in like places like Finland or Germany or Hungary. So there are many different options. You would create a much fairer tax system. You might relieve the burden on families in the taxation system. You might even help with housing, because that's one of the major problems. You might say, if you're thinking of having a family, we could give you a loan. You would probably help students with their student debt. So you might take off they pay really high interest on their debt. These are all things that are facing young families, that they don't feel they can have babies or look after them. You might give longer maternity or parental leave, and you would certainly make child benefit fair, because at the moment it really penalises stay at home, and you would also maybe support the household, like allow families to be taxed as a household, because at the moment, you pay much more tax if you are a single income household than if you both go out to work. So there's a lot of things that you could do.
Yeah, that's a very long raft of things that we could take to government and see if they would take any of those on board. What about you, Christina? You're putting your babies at the centre of the future policies. What are we going to do?
I think it's all about parent partnership. So listening to the parents and, seeing what they feel is best for their baby, and anyone being able to make that decision. I think it should be up to them. But I think the key is, for sure, being able to listen to the parents and what they need for their babies, and just ensuring that we can provide quality care for those young babies coming into nurseries.
So I'm sorry, I just got a bit distracted.
Okay.
Question from June. Thank you, Christina.
Ask her a bit more about what.
June, why don't you come? You come. June would like to talk to you. She's
Okay.
coming.
Christina, I was
Hello.
just listening to this whole debate, and it's really interesting, I have to say. I'm loving some of Anne's thoughts on some of this stuff. But yeah, I think you're not being hard enough on the issue of what do people need to know to do in a decent nursery, because we have a lot of babies and we like them. That's the first thing. And the second thing is, I'm not seeing good quality training for babies at all. I'm really quite concerned about this. And so, like, okay, we're kind of committed to it, but like there are other places out there who are not committed to it. And so I'm just thinking, Christina, you and I know you a long time, 19 years, you tell me. And I was just thinking, like, what are the critical kind of traits and sort of approaches and skills and knowledge and human compassion that is necessary when you want to employ someone that's going to lead your baby room? I mean, when your child was with us, like, what was critical for her?
So,
that's kind of thing I think is really interesting.
I think it starts with the passion. So teachers have to have passion. If they don't have passion, then they should not be working with children. So I think it starts with the passion, and just the attachment to the teachers. So just having that, even if it is just that one person in the room that the baby is attached to, once they have that first attachment, they then feel confident enough to go off and build other attachments with teachers in the room. Providing a safe environment for the babies. So also when we're looking at our environment for the younger babies, just making sure they have enough room around. Sometimes at home it is just, okay, we'll put the baby in the bouncer, there isn't enough space. So making sure our environment is suitable for all the babies that join us as well.
What about knowing? What do they need to know, Christina?
So,
I mean, what do people think they need to know to, like, the word on the street, guys, is that the training is happening, and that they're not learning key theories like the theory of attachment. No one's ever heard of Pickler. You know, they don't understand basic things like how do you support a child's learning when they're changing a nappy. Things we take for granted, but actually, I mean, I don't know if the Sarah and Tina and Anne are hearing this, but I mean, Greg and I are both nodding here because we're both heard this. And that when you ask them what is attachment, which to me is fundamental because it's about the child and the adult relationship, they don't really get it.
We've actually just had an anonymous attendee sent in a comment saying, since having many more 9-month-olds starting nursery, we have seen that it is taking longer and is much more challenging to support them to form attachments and settle in. It has also brought to the fore the lack of knowledge and specialist training of early years teachers working with babies. So exactly what you're saying. And she says this needs to be addressed by the government, but more importantly, the early years organisations.
I agree. Can I come in here, please? As I was listening to June and to Christina, I absolutely loved the fact that June said, we look after babies and we love our babies. I was talking and not all nurseries are like that, I know that. I was talking to a baby room leader quite recently in a very well-respected nursery in a city, a university nursery in a city, and this person was the baby room lead. She is now thinking of coming out of early years completely because she said they've got 26 babies in that baby room. Most were new in September. And she said the noise of the babies crying, she can't cope with that amount of noise all day long. And what she said, the bit that really worried me and would worry, I'm sure, any of the parents if they knew, she said the babies have to understand that they've got to cry and get over that before they realise everything's fine. There was no talk about attachment, building attachment. There was no talk about communication or behaviour as communication. There was no talk of anything like that. And this is a really well-respected nursery. So I think for me, it needs to start, regardless of whether mum goes out to work, dad goes out to work, mum stays at home. It needs to start with the baby and what the babies need. And training parents has never had much political feet to it, but it ought to be there in places like Sure Start centres for those that want it. But to teach people about what babies need, about that nurturing, about the attachment, about children learning through their senses, and about it's never okay to leave a baby crying for a long period of time. It's not okay. And I think to have time as well, to not have so many babies that you don't have time for those cuddles and those gentle routines that babies need. And I think until government has policymakers who fully understand early years and what babies need, and enough income in the GDP to put their money where their mouth is, I'm not sure things will change enough in the way that we would like and that our babies deserve. Sorry.
And can I just follow that? I mean, I know when I first started having children 24 years ago, there's much more support. I went to a sort of health visiting group, which I formed with, and we formed a group with 10 other mothers, and we did like 10 weekly classes in raising babies, and that's all gone. And there was so much more support, you know, in the libraries and just telling parents how important they are, and you know, in terms of their engagement with their baby, they really are the most important thing. And then, you know, the caregiving and comes with it to help you. But parents also need to know their important role and how to manage babies and how to look after them. That's also, yeah, very important.
Absolutely. And it isn't about the parents who maybe can't afford all the newest things at this time of year they're going to see advertised on the television. The most important thing is one person who's got time. And I think parents don't hear that often enough. And I think our early years workforce don't always hear that often enough.
So am I right in understanding that this new policy has been rolled out, but there's been no kind of focus from the government to ensure that the caregivers understand babies from 9 months old? Is that correct?
I think
that's correct. In our study, we've seen that of those we talked to through our focus group and conferences, which, by the way, were packed because we were offering free CPD and a day of like really engagement and relationship, and people were really craving that because it is lacking. It's not even that it's poor quality. There is very little CPD that relates to the baby room. But what we've heard over and over again, and like, is that very few had the time or the money or just the capacity to attend CPD the previous year, and only 1/3 of the people that attended CPD the previous year attended baby room specific CPD. So again, it just like, we often complain that in reception, things from primary school get dumbed down, and it's not the same to work with a 5-year-old and an 8-year-old. That's the same with 3 and 4-year-old, and now we're doing the same. We hear a lot of things, a lot of training that are for like 2, 3-year-old, and then get dumbed down for babies. And it's just like there is no child development expertise and no child development training in many of the trainings either. So it's really, that is really worrying us.
Yeah, this is very worrying. And I've had a comment here from someone saying to put in a baby focused policy, it is important to review the fundamentals of attachment, child development, and pedagogy. And this should be the focus of teachers, parents, and policymakers. So how is this going to be fed back to policymakers? How is the sector kind of coping? So we've heard that there are some baby rooms that are really full and some people are not really coping. Have they just accepted, is it because of the funding that they're taking the babies, even though maybe they're not quite ready for it? Again, is this another economic policy that's driving things in the wrong direction? What can the sector do to sort of push back? Or do we need to engage parents to try and push back and say, fair enough, like this is a great offer for you and you need to get back to work, but maybe this isn't the best thing for your child?
Definitely. When you hear that, I'm sorry, that's what I think. Babies need 1-to-1, 2-to-1, 3-to-1. And when you have babies, you don't just have one baby, you then go on to have another baby. So you do have the interaction, and you meet other mums and other families. But unless you can fund it properly or give very, very high quality care, then you are replacing, quite good quality care with not so good care, unless you can absolutely guarantee that what you're replacing it with is better than what you can provide.
Does anybody else want to come back on that? I mean, obviously, we're not saying that all the baby rooms are not doing a good job. So
no, there's big variation across nurseries that are for profits and not for profits, or with social responsibility. I'm looking at June here. There's a big difference between the childminder and those that are like really big and profit driven. We know there's a big conversation about like foreign-owned nurseries where, like really the responsibilities to the stakeholders. But after all, if we keep having this conversation about childcare being a hot market for investors, that shows again the values, right? So I think there's a place for regulation. There's again a place for societal change. And at the same time, I think I just don't want to sit here and thinking about, it's too late to sit here and thinking about like, well, what should we do? Should we take away the policy? No. I don't think that the solution is let's go back to what was before. I think the solution is to understand that it is critical that we act fast on focusing on quality and the workforce and what can support this going in the right direction.
My question would be, how can you do that? How can you get lots of people into the workforce to the kind of numbers that you're talking about when people don't really want to go in, whether it's low paid, and it's hard work, because it is hard work. It's hard work raising 1 or 2, let alone 10.
We spend more than 2% of the GDP on defense.
That's nothing.
It's a matter of priorities, sometimes we kind of like keep going, but like we can't ask for more money. Well, actually we can, right? It's a matter of priority and policy will, and people vote. So there's voters. So I think that there is I'm not saying that we can inject billions of pounds, and I'm not saying it should all go to nursery. I think there's a lot of policies for families that need to be there at the same time. But for this particular case, there is a lot of also like ongoing training that can happen. There is a lot of support that can be given. There's an expansion of the stronger practice hubs. I'm not saying that the solution is immediate, but if we don't get started, we will definitely never get there. So at least there are things that we can do in the short term to make this not like a missed opportunity to finally open up the conversation around what does quality mean and how do we get there. And yes, sadly, there will be children that don't have it right now. But I think there are also children that have really difficult family situations that, you know, like can benefit from it. So yeah, there's a first step to take.
Yeah, I think it's so important to remember that, you know, we're talking in general terms, but there's thousands, millions of different situations that families are in, and this will this will be good for some people, not good for other people. Suit some
I
babies,
think
not suit
as
other
well,
babies.
sorry, can I just say
Yes.
something? I think as well it is about having smaller baby rooms. So working in early years for 19 years and working in different settings where we've had 21 babies in some, 25 in others, and now being in a setting where there's 12 to 15 babies a day, you do notice a difference in quality. So I think it should be something that is put in that actually it's a good policy. However, we should limit the number of babies per room.
And what
We've
about
pushed
the
and we've
ratio?
written the ministers about that. That is our number one recommendation: is smaller baby rooms. There is much way out of that.
I think something possibly the government, if I can just come in here, could do quite simply to encourage more settings and childminders to undertake training is the fact that at the moment there is no legal number of hours of CPD that anybody needs to do. They have to keep their safeguarding updated and their first aid updated. And there is an expectation that people will do some CPD. But until there are things like more expectation on the topics that you will cover and more expectation that we want you to do, you know, even 10 hours a year, I think with that in place, people would do it because it's there, and then they would gain information and skills and knowledge from the training that they do. So I think for me, it's lacking that we don't have that CPD limit on an expectation that you will do an X number of hours a year. And for people like childminders, they can't get supply cover. They're doing this in their family time, in their evenings and in their weekends. And it's difficult in settings to provide that supply cover as well. I do understand that, having worked in settings. But I think that would be a quite simple change the government could do that wouldn't cost the government any money, but it would just mean that there's an expectation that people do training, that you might have a qualification that's 30 years old, but that doesn't mean that you know everything that we know now about babies' brain development, because that is new since 30 years ago. And I think we need to, all of us, understand in the workforce that we need to keep constantly refreshing what we know. And I think that CPD expectation would help with that.
Can I ask, what about the ratio 2 to 1? Is that the right ratio? Or would anyone suggest changing that?
Well, for childminders, it's 1 baby per adult.
The evidence is clear that 3 to 1 is good. However, we're also very clear, and Christine and John will probably agree, is that it also depends on the situation. Like, we've talked to a lot of baby room professionals where if you have a lot of babies settling in, if you have 6 settling in at the same time, 3 to 1 will feel too much. And then it depends on the age combination you have. If you have a non-walker with a 2-year-old, an 18-month-old, it feels very different. So I think there should be like a room for maneuver in that ratio to account for those times.
Like Greg has 9 in his 2 baby rooms.
Okay, so I don't know if you had that. In this nursery, they have 9 babies in two baby rooms. I've just got 2 more comments here, not slightly on a different subject. Someone called Ramona has asked about parental support. So she says, how about the educational support for parents in understanding age-appropriate expectations from birth? What could this look like? Who should be responsible and how early? So I suppose that's the other side of, what if you're not accessing professional support? How can you deliver that care yourself at home? Who should be helping you do that?
I can answer a little bit about that. I think Well, Heckman's quite clear that the parent really is a key factor in the successful outcomes of very young children, and he talks about high quality care, but he also says that for a fraction of the cost that to get high quality care in daycare, by educating the parents, by helping the parents know that how important their role is, you can achieve the same sort of outcome for children. And so, whether that's health visitors who come to your home, or whether you can, like the family hubs that are now starting up all over, if they can really concentrate on, we don't want to teach parents, you don't want patronizing, but you want to support them and you want to sort of big them up. You want to say, your role is so important and you're doing such a good job, and you want to make them feel like what they're doing is a really worthwhile thing to do, because it is important for the baby and the parent to have a really strong relationship and to have that that important care. And so we can do something through like the family hubs, or what used to be health visitors, through your local surgeries, maybe through libraries or rhyme times, and group settings, play groups, lots of play groups and things like that.
Yeah, that sounds great. I mean, as a parent, I feel like I have got an extra job, and I have been training very hard, although I haven't had any professional training. What about, this is another slightly different subject, but it's back to the idea of the funding. It's an anonymous attendee, and she says, I read a news article today where a mother was advised to have a C-section in early April, but she asked them if they booked her in for March so that the child would be eligible for funding sooner. This was sad to read, as she asked her baby was born earlier than recommended, just so she can be financially better off later when she went back to work. And obviously we have no idea what the situation of that mother was. Maybe that was something that she actually really needed to do. So, I mean, it's just, I guess, the theme of this conversation sometimes being, is this policy pushing parents in a direction that maybe they wouldn't have chosen if it didn't exist? Or is it actually there to help parents make a choice? Does anybody want to come back to that point?
Can I just say that I think that's very, very sad for the whole family, that is something that they're considering. When I asked our members for their opinions on the briefing for today's session, some childminders were saying that because it's an automatic entitlement to 30 hours of what the government used to call free but now called funded childcare, for parents who work less hours than that, say 16 hours a week, they can automatically access 30 hours. And for them, there were concerns that maybe for some parents who maybe weren't particularly confident in their ability to parent, or not quite as strong in their joy of their children as we would perhaps like, that they would be tempted to use the full 30 hours anyway. And that reduces the time that baby is with mummy or daddy or whoever's at home. And they thought that that maybe wasn't a very good policy move, that you hit this benchmark and that you can automatically get 30 hours. And then for people who only have contracts of 15 hours, of course, they get no help at all. So it doesn't seem equal at the moment.
We are actually coming up to the end of our time. It's going to be very hard to sum up this conversation. We've covered a lot, and there are so many suggestions that you've made about how to make things better. Some of the ones I've noted down here, first of all, Sarah's strong point that it's very critical to act fast in the workforce, and this should be the focus of trying to improve this policy for babies if we are going to have a baby-focused policy. Anne has made a suggestion that money should follow the child rather than the providers, and it should be universally available. And that, I think everybody agreed that all policy should follow evidence on what's best for babies, rather than following what's best for the economy. And one of the points was that smaller baby rooms could be an improvement to the current system. For the sector, obviously better pay, something everyone's been asking for a long time, especially better pay than vets is what Sarah would like to see, and better expectations for CPD, which wouldn't cost the government anything but would encourage people to do more training. For parents, the idea that we want to have a village raising our children, and that village, it sounds very much like it could be in a nursery, in a childminding setting, in a home, but everybody should be pulling together to help and support each other, and that parents should have choice as well, that they shouldn't feel like they are being pushed into one direction or the other. For the government, you suggested that we would like to see the way that they're framing the conversation to be different and to be baby focused. And this shouldn't be a Labour policy. This should be about children and the way that they're going to grow and develop into adults. And as for the economy, Jean whispered to me about the happiness indicator. So could we measure how we are and put a price on or a sum on how we are improving children's well-being? And would that help encourage people to make better choices? Now, I don't know if Jean wants to say anything or if anybody else wants to say anything before we go. Are there any more burning things you need to get off your chest?
I'm just going to thank you all very much. And I'm really pleased that we decided to have this conversation, because I think we're quite brave. You know, we often avoid the complex, deeply uncomfortable conversations. And it is uncomfortable because we're talking about children who are 9 months old and we have to be advocates for them. And it's really difficult when babies get caught up in policy decisions and are, to some degree, the unintended consequence. So I think the message I've got today is that we're not against each other, we're with each other, that actually there's some places are better for some children than others. Ultimately, the importance of engagement and warm relationships is powerful, whether it's childminding, whether it's at home, or whether it's in a nursery. And while some children are what I call lucky children, and they have very supportive homes, not every child is in that circumstance. But I think we can only make this difference if we really are strong together, and that we actually adhere to the notion of quality. So I think working on Sarah's kind of research around that as a central core, I think then it should be reflected, like the voices of Anne and Mothers at Home, the voices of Christina as nurseries, and the voices of Tina and all the childminders, you know, so that it kind of sort of ripples through like an ecological response. And then we wrap it around the wider concepts of things like dads and you know, paternity, maternity leave and stuff, because actually we have created an economy that's dependent on both parents working. And like single parents are always going to be lost on that. They're always going to be behind on that. And we have allowed that to happen. And you might say that maybe a consequence of feminism. It's a bigger discussion. But I don't think we should leave that. I think we should pick this up and do it again. And I would say those of you who run organizations, maybe you have your next conference on this very matter. And actually you bring a panel together that is, you know, not aligned in the sense that we're not all, you know, singing from the same hymn sheet, but ultimately we're all about children. We love those little babies who come into us. We want to give them the best. And we actually, you know, are real advocates for them because no one else will stand up for them. So I would say thank you very much again, and bring us all together, guys.
Yeah, in fact, we've just had a comment from someone echoing that. Ricky has said, to ensure that babies remain central in policy development, should that commitment begin here today? Some of the discussion has highlighted differences in their predominantly negative tone, rather than considering which style of provision would best support the needs of the child. So I guess that's a little takeaway for everyone to think about. And also, Emma has said, it is also critical to note that being at home with a baby or a parent is not always the best, and being in a form of early years care can be beneficial for family. Okay, so yeah, we have covered this a bit today. So that's another thing about supporting children at home. Should governments engage with organisations such as LEYF, given that we have an expert institute that designs high quality teaching and training beyond the organisation itself? I don't know if Jean wrote that message in, maybe.
No, I didn't.
A little bit suspicious there. So an anonymous attendee, so we won't hold her to it. I think unless there's anything else anyone wanted to say, I wanted to thank you for such a really interesting debate. I've got so much to think about when I leave today, and also thank you to all the people who joined us and sent in questions. I'm sorry we didn't get to read all of them out, but I think that is it.
That is it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.